So, from principles into practice. As you know, we had making the PYP happen. We have moved from principles into practice. This is our digital site. If you are an IB World School, you have access to My IB. If you're a candidate school, do you have your access? If you are an interested school, you do not. But this is what you would get if you were a candidate school or an IB World School. So we have, for you on My IB, several portals for you to be supported in your journey in PYP. So we have program communities, IBIN. How many of you are IBIN? The Educator Network. Yep. Program Resource Centre, Engage, IBIN Engage, roles and answers. This is the one we're going to talk about. This is the one where Principles into Practice sits. So the Program Resource Centre, we call it the PRC, for the Program Resource Centre. So often you'll ask people and say, oh, it's on the PRC. That's what that means. All 4 programs are there. Also, up in the corner, I know this is really difficult to see, and I know that the focus is not good, but it's also all the resources for what is an IB education, to understand the big picture. There are lots of resources in there for PYP as well. Program standards and practices we will come back to, and My resources. So on the PRC, which is different from the old OCC, is you can bookmark resources and start your own collection. So instead of keep trying to find things, really recommend you start using that feature of My resources. So you start tagging things and you have them all in one collection for you. The Program Resource Centre gives you news updates, IB resources, PYP resources, and My resources. I just need to stress this one for you. News updates. These come all the time. Because it's a digital resource and we're going to keep uploading new things, you will always be alerted through that news update. If you miss the news update, you can always scroll down to the section that says news updates and you can see everything that you may have missed. So even if you look in once a month or once every couple of months, you can always keep up to date with all the new updates that have come out. But this is the one we want. This is how you get to the PYP resources. And when you get to the PYP resources, there's something that's called the enhanced PYP, and that's not going to stay there for long, obviously, because soon it's just going to be the PYP. But it's just a reminder that this is the new one you're looking at. And under that, we're looking for PYP from principles into practice. That is the star of the show. That's where you need to go. And once you're there, you get to this site. So this is the site that gives you all the content knowledge, or all the content for what is the PYP. We organise it under these 3 pillars, the learner, learning and teaching, and the learning community. A little tab at the top gives us in 6 languages, one of which is Arabic. So all of the resources, all of the programs into practice is in Arabic. Because it is on a digital site, we can actually monitor who's using it, how it's being used, and that sort of information drives our decision making. What is really important to people, what are people not looking at, and we can start to say, well, what is it that we can do to support the users more? It was launched on the 31st of October. In the first 3 months, we had nearly 25,000 visitors to the site. I think most of them were Nicole and myself and the team, just to make sure it was still there. It's like checking your baby. Yeah, still there. But we have been watching how it's been used over time. So for the first 3 months, what we have been pleased to see are people are still engaging with it. There is still a high level engagement. The dip in the middle was the Christmas winter break for many schools. I'm very glad to see people were not looking at it at that point. I think the other thing that we can find out is most people have their staff meetings on Tuesday or Wednesday. That's when people are most likely looking at it. But we are consistently being accessed, not on the weekends. They're the dips. We know that. Now I can sing! They've given it to me for a purpose. Since the launch, 719,000 page views. So it's been very popular. No surprise there. 48.8% of you come back for the second time or more. So there are repeat users. We can tell if the people are coming back. Or just looking once and saying, yep, I'm going to download it and I'm done. We're glad to see that at least half of you are using it as a digital resource and keep coming back to it. And we can see what you're looking at. That sounds very creepy. I don't mean it to sound creepy, but we can see where people are starting to investigate on what they're reading. And what we're noticing, the 3 different colours are the 3 months of November, December and January. And you can see that by far the most accessed content within Principles into Practice is around learner agency. That is the piece that people are looking at the most. And that, I think, is for 2 reasons. One, it's new, and it wasn't in making the PYP happen. And the second reason is it's the buzzword around at the moment. So people really want to start there. They know about collaboration, they know about concepts, so that's not their starting point. So they're looking at learner agency. Just looking at those numbers or that graph, what is interesting to see if we combine or go back and correlate that against the actual digital resource, this is where people are starting. So the real focus for many schools is on the learner, and they're starting to investigate that pillar first. And then into learning and teaching, transdisciplinary learning. If you're at the pre-con yesterday, that was what that session was on, assessment and language. So what I'd really like to know, is where did you start? So for the IB World schools, have you accessed it? Where did you start? With the learner. Learner agency? Yeah? Same thing? So your numbers have been recorded. There is a button at the bottom of each of the pillars if you want to download it as a PDF. And that's often good if you want to put it onto a local server. And then you can access and you don't have to be online to access it. So that's handy. I know many people have printed that off, and you can print that off. If you do print it off, this is what a PDF looks like, this is for the learner. If you do print it off, just remember that we will be updating things and tell you in the news update. Remember that we are trying to save trees. And remember that if you scroll down to the copyright page, there is which version you're looking at. So there is a version date on it. So if in November you have downloaded it and printed it off, take note that it was updated in December. So just have a look and see which version you're considering. And that comes to play if, for example, you're writing into IB Answers and you've got a question about something, and they might say, and you say, and it's on page 32 of the download that I have, it may no longer be page 32. So then it just gets confusing. So if it's saying it's on page 32 of the December version, then it's much easier for us to all communicate.
I just also want to add that I also want to be clear that we won't be constantly updating the main content of the resources because it takes time for school to really understand all that there is and start to put in change management in your school. The updates that we're talking about are really, if we found
spelling
that error in there, exactly. So it's not so much about content or research or theory. It's really more things that shouldn't be affecting your understanding of the content. Where you see a lot of updates will be in the section that says TSF, because that's an area that we want to continue to provide more examples for schools. So that's where you want to look for new materials.
Yeah. The things that have changed, did any of you download it in October? And have it from then? Okay. The only things that we added to the content in this version is one of the graphics, and it was in the news update. One of the graphics we replaced because we had the wrong word on it. So one of the graphics was replaced, and underneath one of the exhibition graphics, the table was missing underneath it. So we've added the table that was missing. All the rest of the updates are spelling, making sure that the borders are coming out correctly, some formatting issues, things like that, rather than the content. But Nicole's quite right. We don't really want to touch this part for the next couple of years. I think we really need people just to engage and learn and understand and challenge and query it before we start updating that. We have had quite a bit of feedback on the new principles into practice, and these are just quotes from teachers and what's in it and how they're accessing it. I'm not going to read them out, but I just want to point out we love hearing from you, and I will show you some of the different channels which you can contact us with, but we love to hear. Often we just hear the things that are wrong. It's really good to also hear what's working well and what you're enjoying or what you've found that is exciting for you. We really like to hear those things. For us, that's just as strong information as, I don't understand this, or what does this mean? So now this is just to you. In your little groups, I know your little tables, your little groups, and at your tables, if you could just talk to, if you are with like, maybe turn around and talk to the people behind you, because I know you're all the same school, aren't you? Talk to the people behind you who are IB World schools. So maybe just, if you guys talk to these guys, you guys talk to them, maybe I'm just going to bring you two up to here. You guys turn around and talk to these, and these two just come up to here. So we've got three sort of groups. What have you started looking at? What has excited you? Are there any challenges that have come up? What is it that you are looking for in the resource? Have you found it or not? Okay, I wish I could sing, because this is when I would sing. I am delighted that we have a lovely balance in the room of people that have experience and those who have many questions, because it's going to save me a lot of time. So we're going to just keep using our experts in the room to actually support our learning. But one of the questions that I have heard come up through those discussions is around the program standards and practices, and what does that mean for transition. So for those of you who don't know how the IB works, we have programs and we have standards and practices. And the standards and practices is what is the framework that gives the programs fidelity. So to make sure that we have the same sort of quality happening around the world. So if you walk into an IB school, it doesn't matter which country you're in an IB school. So these standards and practices have just been reviewed or refreshed. So the new standards and practices were released at the same time as Principles into Practice for PYP. So only the PYP specifications have been published. So the MYP and the DP specifications have not been published. So the standards and practices are not actually in use, and you don't have to use them yet. We deliberately asked for them to be published at the same time as Principles into Practice, because if you are a school that is engaging with the new content, you really need to see what that means for implementation against standards and practices. So we didn't want people exploring something and say, oh, let's do it this way, and then in 2 years' time give you new standards and practices, and you say, oh, no, I've got to do it this way. What happens here is that, A, because they've both been published, schools are thinking, now I need to do this. The pressure is not there. We published them at the same time to give you plenty of time, not to say you have to move to these now, but to give you time to think about how you can connect these together. So you're not doing your change management or your action plans in isolation. You find them on the PRC, the Program Resource Centre, underneath Program Standards and Practices. This is where they sit. When you look at them, it looks like this. Well, people do. Yeah, in the IB we like to say everything's a PSP, IB. You know, we do. We call them PSPs. So the Program Standards and Practices are now based on this format. And this is what I love. It's the recognition that the IB philosophy, together with the school context, determines your school. So it's where your school is and what the IB philosophy is and how we put that together. And what are the lenses that we look at when we do that is what is the school's purpose, the environment, the culture, and the learning. So they are the 4 standard headings that we are looking at. What's interesting to note when you go to this landing page is very, very small, up in the corner, there are 2 tabs. One is 2014 and one is 2020. These are the new ones for 2020. So they're not valid. They won't be used until 2020 onwards. And the first evaluation is 2022, I believe. So you won't even be evaluated against them until 2022. So PYP, you've got at least 4 years to get used to these. So there's plenty of time and no time to there's no need to panic here. If you've just had your evaluation visit, you are in the best place possible. If your evaluation visit is at the end of 2020, I'm not going to say you're at the worst place possible, but that will give you more challenge, is to say, I really want to move forward, but there will be tensions. The 2014 are the ones that you will be using. What's interesting for you guys to know, of course, all of this is in Arabic. So you can share those with your schools. But there is a period of flexibility, and this is what we're calling this transition time. So it is a period of flexibility. I can't even say this first line, Nicole. Schools have ample time for reflection, planning, and consideration of how the program might best be implemented in their context. Ample time, years. There is no rush to move into something. However, we are all professionals. We don't want to say that we are not on the ball. We want to be ahead of, of our learning. And so many of us are racing down the track of trying to align them as fast as possible. You have time. And I actually think it is a brilliant opportunity that very few schools get to actually say, we can stop and reconsider what we are and who we are as a school again. It is a time to re-envisage what learning, culture, purpose and environment in your school actually looks like, and actually spend some time considering that rather than racing into understanding the standards and practices. So you have time to actually say, what is learning in our school? Consider that through the eyes of those. What is our purpose? What is our environment? What does learning look like in our school? So these opportunities don't come around very often. Use this time to actually re-envisage what you're doing in your school. Certainly, we publish them both at the same time to allow you to look at them together, alongside each other, so that you have the information from principles into practice and you have the standards and practices, so you're not making choices from one to the other that you have to change later. The period of flexibility has started. So how many of you have got evaluation visits this year? You've just had yours. They're in the best place. Next year? Oh, brilliant. 2021? 2022? When in 2022? So you would be on the new standards and practices. So you've got plenty of time to now reconsider what that is. I hope so. June last year, we published the transition document. Have you all seen this document? Yeah? It actually lists, if you do have an evaluation visit coming up, where the standards and practices are offering flexibility. And by that it means that you can explore some of the new content and you're not going to get a matter to be addressed in your evaluation. So there are areas that, for example, in the old standards and practices, you have to use the PYP planning template. Of course, we've changed that from principles into practice. We're saying, here's one if you're just starting, feel free to use this, or use the planning process to actually design your own. So there is this there's this flexibility around planners now. So if you had an evaluation visit coming up and you're on the old standards and practices, but you want to use a new planner, you can. Just on the planners, how many of you realise that you can't write and it's not a writable one? No. So the good news is, by the end of the month, we will publish 3 new writable planners. So there will be ones. However, a little bit restructured only because we couldn't fit all the text in. But it's the same content that's in those. Yes, the same. But once we put something up, you've got to be very careful, because what we were finding are people were opening up the document and then just starting to plan straight into it, and then overwriting what was up there, and then your planner was there for everybody to see. So if you are going to use one, always download it first and then use it. Don't just open it up and say, here it is, let's plan, because unless you want to share it with the world, because that is what you are doing, is sharing it with the world. And you'll probably find when you go back in, someone's overwritten yours. So always download it and then use it. I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm coming. I'm coming to the Building for the Future workshop, which is not in Arabic, unless your workshop leader translates it, which is a question that was asked. I will come to that. So what are your PD requirements? So if you're an interested school, this slide's for you. So if you're an interested school thinking about it, these are what your requirements would be for PD to get started. So it depends on when you are going to apply for candidacy, what your requirements are. But very much it's about your head or your principal doing one of the CAT means category, the category 1 workshops for leaders. And this is the Building for the Future workshop. So the Building for the Future workshop is the workshop that is mandatory for all schools to send one person along, usually your PYP coordinator, unless your PYP coordinator, of course, is an IBAN, or someone in your school is an IBAN, then of course you don't have to attend a course that you can run yourself. However, I've just been to the first one. They started the 1st of March, and the first Building for the Future workshop was held in Dubai last week. Half the schools sent more than one person from the school, so they sent the PYP coordinator and a head. And then about 6 or 7 schools just sent one person. And the most feedback we got from that workshop was, I wish that 2 people from my school had gone. Because you get a lot more out of the workshop when you're actually collaborating with someone else from your school. So if you can send 2 people to that workshop, that would be the most beneficial for your school. You have to have done it by then. It's ready now. Yep, it's ready now. So I'm going to actually show you the schedule for this region. Yeah. If you are a candidate school, this is your schedule. So your coordinators and your teachers, it depends on the date that you're coming to, need to now not do Making the PYP Happen, the old Category 1 workshops. They need to do the new Category 1 workshops, which again, believe it or not, is called Making the PYP Happen, Implementing Agency. Because it's still about making the PYP happen. That is still the core of that. Category 1 workshops for interested schools. These are workshops that give you what I call the taster journey of PYP. So it's there's the Leading the Learning or Making the PYP Happen, one for leaders, one for teachers or educators, and it is the taster. What are these big ideas that are going on in the PYP? There is an online one.
So is it mandatory before we apply? Because sometimes after we apply?
It depends on your date of approval. Yeah. So this is, so you're as a candidate, this is your authorisation date. Then you need to have done it before that, before your authorisation date.
And it is also in April we apply.
As a candidate school, it's for the head. I'll sit down and talk through your dates. No, you're good. If you are an IB World school, basically you know what PD requirements there are. You're already meeting those. It's just a reminder that somebody needs to go to Building for the Future. And that really, the Building for the Future one is to bring the enhanced PYP in line with your action plan. And it's very much about developing your action plan moving forward with the new content. And again, face-to-face from this month, online from May. So what I just again, we're going to use the same groups and my same experts in the room. What PD have you done? What PD would you like to do? And what is your plan for the building for the future one? Okay, thank you guys. Any questions for me? Or better yet, any questions for Nicole? We have a question? Yeah, any questions over here? I love that it's all being explained in a language that I can't speak. So I do actually want to spend some time actually looking at the new workshops. And so for interested schools and candidate schools, what sort of, we say go to these workshops, what are these workshops? What are you going to get from them? And why would you do them? Because we had a whole suite of old former category ones, which are taster ones for everybody, category 2, which dive deeper into something, and category 3, which is a deep dive into a specific area. They are now, we changed how we look at professional development for our schools because we had the opportunity to actually say we've got a new program, so a new way of looking or thinking about what we're doing in our classrooms. Let's take that opportunity to think about what we're doing with our teachers and how we're training our teachers to become PYP teachers. So some of these new words in the enhanced PYP, we had to bring into the workshop. So what does agency look like now in workshops for teachers? And then how can we build teacher capabilities? The old workshops went like this. Inquiry is a key thing, a key element, and therefore there's a whole workshop on inquiry, and you're going to find out what inquiry is, and when you leave you will know what inquiry is. And these are concepts, and this is what concepts are, and you go away and you learn about concepts. It was a very knowledge-driven approach, which is not a PYP approach. So this was about what are we trying to actually do in these workshops? And we're trying to build our teacher capabilities. How do I become a better PYP teacher? So we had this assumption that PYP teachers are highly skilled and they're knowledgeable, they're professionals that are engaged in communities of practice. This is what we know that we already have. We have experts in the field already. This we know. The approach was, so how do we help them to develop their PYP capabilities? So the outcome was, how do we build workshops that strengthen your professional voice, choice and ownership? So what we say in Principles into Practice needs to be applied in our workshops. So we looked at this and we thought, what capabilities do PYP teachers have that may be different from other teachers? What is it that makes a PYP teacher a PYP teacher? So we looked at the approaches to teaching. And we said, we have these approaches to teaching, and these are the same approaches to teaching for all IB teachers. This is what makes an IB teacher. So we looked at these approaches to teaching and said, let's work out how to build capabilities within these approaches to teaching. Should I be singing over this? Exactly. So we took these, and these are the new Cat 2 workshops. I'm going to go to the Cat 2. So we said that we have a concept-driven curriculum. So we have a Cat 2 workshop called Concept-Driven Learners. Not about concepts, not about building concept-driven, concept-based curriculum. It's how do you develop your capabilities to develop concept-driven learners. Engaging collaborative communities, evidencing learning, local and global inquirers, making space for learning, and your exhibition, not just the exhibition. These used to be workshops called things like concepts, inquiry, assessment. These new titles give you an idea of how these workshops have changed. It is much more about learning, it is much more about the learner, and it is much more about you as a professional. So if, for those of you who have done workshops in the past and have led workshops, that were very much a sit and get, well, they never sit and get. PYP workshops are never sit and get. But it was all about some sort of content transfer. These are about building capabilities. So there is a change in focus about this. It's not just tell me what this is, it's how do I be a better teacher doing this. I think they're incredibly exciting, but I'm biased. Going back to the category ones, so there's, and this is what was being asked here, there are 4 new category ones, 2 for educators and 2 for leaders of your PYP coordinators and your principals. Making the PYP happen, implementing agency for both primary years and early years. Leading the learning both for primary years and for early years. Oh, it's called leading early years. And this is the new category 3, which is building for the future, which everyone is going to do because it's about looking about how we transition. There is still a selection of category 3 workshops that are subject based, and these are still on the old scope, the current, in my mind they're old, but in the current scope and sequence, these are still available and will continue to be available until we have reviewed the scope and sequences and put new workshops together. The other category 3, the specialist titles, are still available. So there's all the selection for early years, the digital learning ones, and the specialist audience ones. All of these will be updated to reflect the new language from the enhanced PYP. So while they're still the old ones, they will be, the workshop leader has to tweak those. And the new work going forward is how do we reimagine what these category 3 workshops could actually be. So how do we make these more of a community of practice, to build something different rather than just new knowledge. So how do we actually move that space from the category 3 into how do we build a professional community of practice, professional learning. So that's what the PD department is working on at the moment. If you want to find a workshop, of course, just go to the IBO front-facing webpage and find a workshop. These are the 2019 Building for the Future workshops in this region. And by this region, I mean Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Is there anyone in the room leading any of those? Organising. She's organising them. Have I got the dates right? So those are the ones that are coming up for Building for the Future. I did just pull this off. These are the ones that the 2 that are coming up in Amman, which is obviously the closest for you guys. So if you're a candidate school, there is a Making the PYP Happy Implementing Agency actually being held in Amman in August. I'd get in quick. Is it? This is one that I just took off the website today. I'm presuming that's as up to date as I know. Oh, it's in Arabic. It's not in English as well?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of modifications that are happening now from the providers, because providers are now asking some modifications to take place. So even if you have the original program, some modifications could have been taken place. So on the site, again, there might be some workshops that are not on the list and vice versa. So, because many of the providers did not realize actually that, let's say, we have to have the category of the
Building for the future.
building for the future. So now, I mean, I personally have asked for it, and on the spot, I got the approval, which is not something that usually happens. So, yes, IB is being very flexible about adding workshops and giving workshops to providers, which is not something that is usually done. So you might have a different list.
So if you need something, I think you go and talk to this lady here. Because she can obviously make things happen very quickly.
No, what I'm saying is IB is being flexible because of these changes.
Yeah.
Which usually is not the case, because as providers we have to send our list a year ahead of time.
So I think that the key message is, if you need something, let people know what you need. And we will, really try to make that happen. You do have a voice. It's if we listen to it. No, I shouldn't have. I needed to put that behind my back. Absolutely. So any more questions about PD? Any of the workshops? Any questions? The question was, do you have a question? You had a question. Is there a question? What is the question? The question that was most often asked is, I've done I've been teaching PYP for 5 years. I've done the concepts workshop. I've done the assessment workshop. Why would I go back and do it again? It is a very different workshop, and it is based on A, you, and B, the new content. So I think all of them have value to relook at again. One thing in the Building for the Future workshop is we were looking at, in your action plan, a school's action plan, when you start actually mapping out what your capabilities are, what your teacher capabilities are, and how you're going to meet those capabilities. Now it's really easy to match those against workshops and sort of say, how can we build our school capability, and how can we make those things happen? So all of a sudden things are starting to align and make sense together. So just a few things on how we support you once you get started. So some of the transition support materials that once you become a school you get. Of course, there's the transition guide that gives you all the information about transition. We have support material in the content. All the new graphics are really, really good for professional learning. As you know, a good graphic can pull ideas together in a very different way. And actually, it also enables a good starting point in a professional learning or a staff meeting when you start with the graphic instead of the content, or start with the content and move to the graphic. But of course, all the graphics are in all the languages as well. The teacher support material are found at the bottom of Principles into Practice. The teacher support material is this is the starting suite. And as Nicole was saying, this is the one we're going to keep updating. For example, there are 4 new ones coming at the end of this month. There'll be another 4 new ones in May, and another 4 new ones in August. So we will continue to upload new examples of teacher practice. All of these have been co-developed with schools, which is why there's fewer at the beginning, because not many schools are using the enhanced PYP. So they are examples of the enhanced PYP. All of the teacher support materials are also in Arabic. So they're actually only in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, aren't they? Yeah.
What we really want to do moving into the future is also sourcing these examples from other languages and translate them back to French, English, and Spanish versus
Yeah.
the other way around. So if you think you have some, you tried some practices and you feel that they are definitely valuable to share with the community, please let us know, contact us, and we would love to partner with you to create resources from your, from the region that's more intentional.
And that's a really important point, thanks Nicole, because we often get things in English and we translate. So it is a translated version of something that was created in English. And what we really are missing is that voice from different languages that we translate back. Because that actually provides us with those different contexts. Yeah. So which teacher support materials are people looking at? Of course, we can always record that. So by far, where everybody started by the looks, is the planner. And they jumped straight into the planner. And I can understand that as an ex-PYP teacher and, working with the planner, it is the thing that is most immediate. However, it is not the thing that is most important. But it is the most immediate. So people have jumped into the planner first, and you can see what else the teachers are starting to look at. For those of you who are interested in the planner and want to start with the planner, I cannot stress this enough. Start with the planning process. This is in the content and on the TSM. Spend some time understanding what this means. What determines good planning? What questions should you be asking? What things should you be monitoring? What things should you be documenting in your planning? What makes good planning is recorded in here. So if you are going to create your own planner, you create it from this. It's from asking these questions of your planning process to develop then the model that you want to use. You did that?
We're going over the process of
Brilliant, great. So that's the flower planner, or the light bulb planner. I've heard it called several things. And of course there's prompts. Again, there's a writable version coming up at the end of the month. The other place that we are housing these and examples of planning are on PYP Communities. How many of you have been to PYP Communities? Well, actually I know the numbers, I don't know the people, but so on PYP Communities, there are examples of school-based planners that have been developed by schools. What I love about these, of course, there is the empty template plus the story of the thinking that went behind the planning. And reading those stories are more important than the templates that have been put up. It's how have other people thought through the planning process to develop something new. So reading those stories, I think, is where the power really lies. That's my next slide. Don't jump. I love a good student. 28,000 views for these planners. So they're really popular. People are really engaging with these. We have the webinars. If you haven't seen this one, this is also housed on PYP Communities, underneath the planners, and it's actually teachers talk. I'm not going to tell you. What is it about?
After season out, they talk about how it's implemented in other schools, and then they would say how it works for each school differently. They would share their ideas, maybe sometimes how to develop those planners, for example. So they're very interesting and useful.
Thank you. We'll pass that on. You'll be delighted to know the second webinar is being planned right now, and the second webinar is about developing your program of inquiry and then reviewing a program of inquiry. So there's another webinar coming up. We're aiming to do 3 or 4 a year to always update, to give you another way of accessing that information. And what's really important is hearing the voices of other educators. Something else that's new, and I think incredibly exciting, that we have coming up is a series of podcasts. And this is capturing the PYP voices. So instead of watching a webinar for an hour, it might be a 20-minute podcast that you can put on your headphones while you're driving to work, cycling to work, walking to work, riding to work, however you get to work. So these are coming up, and these are actual interviews with PYP teachers discussing PYP issues, the things that all of us come to these events to hear. So we're capturing those. And of course, if you haven't been to the Sharing PYP blog, I strongly urge you to go back there. And please submit blogs and articles. We love to publish your voice. And this is a place to have your voice published and your story published. So there are guidelines on how to submit an article. This is a public site, isn't it? So if you're just an interested school, you have access to this. The other thing that's on this page, of course, are all the early years resources. So if you are looking for early years specific resources, they sit there at the moment. So any questions about all those support materials? Correct response. So what's coming up next? Is that you're sneaking out? I love you. She's such a teacher. Oh, she caught me. Sat down immediately. Please.
I thought you wanted to say something to me outside of that. Okay, but they're coming with me as well.
I know you need to go. I was just making you feel awkward. And I think I did that quite successfully. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll talk about you when you've left the room.
Okay, behind our backs.
Safe travels.
Thank you so much.
So what's coming up next? And again, and to repeat what's happening in MYP and to repeat what Nicole said as well, we have just launched Principles into Practice. So we're going to give you time to actually explore and engage that. While you're exploring and engaging and letting us know how that is going for you, we have started on reviewing the scope and sequence documents. We are not following the MYP and DP pattern of one subject at a time. We're doing them all together. And we're doing them all together for two reasons. One, we are a transdisciplinary program. All of these things need to look the same, sound the same, and have that same lens. Number two, we need something to do. So we are doing, you know that's not true. So we're reviewing all of these subjects together. How many of you use the current scope and sequence? What do you like about them?
Not having the H's, of course, and definitely the conceptual understandings.
What don't you like about them?
Not much of
Does it worry you that they all look different? Or structured differently?
same spirit.
Oh, I adore you. They do have the same spirit, but they're hard. We make it quite difficult to access them in because we structure them in different ways.
But I mean, if we're talking about the math, the language, the arts, and except for science and social studies, which makes sense, should be different, then all the others are quite similar.
Oh, I need to just talk to you and say, why do you think they should be different? But we'll move into that later. That's another conversation. So we are looking at the scope and sequence. Oh, see how quickly I did that? We did do a survey last year to just find out how they're used and who's using them and how they are being used. We find that, of course, many of our contexts, schools have to use a mandated curriculum, but they're still aligning with the scope and sequence, often because we provide conceptual understandings that other curriculums don't. So there's an alignment exercise that goes on. So we know that schools are using them. So what we're doing in the process at the moment is we've done teacher surveys, we've got a base camp that are looking at the different subjects, we've got working groups, we have a symposium coming up on April 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and in that symposium is all around considering the architecture of curriculum. So what components of a good curriculum do our PYP schools need? And then how do we best provide that so that schools can access it in a way that they can design their own scope and sequence? Because everybody's scope and sequence will look different depending on your context. So how do we provide a global one that is accessible to all? And of course, coming down to that question is, what is a core body of knowledge? What does every primary child need, wherever you are in the world? What is it that everybody needs? And then, how do we leave space for people to be able to design their own to meet local context and local need? So, of course, that's quite an exciting project, because when most curriculum are developed, it's at a national or a state level, and they want it to be the same for everybody. But how do you design something that is not the same for everybody? And again, it comes back to my two words, flexibility. Is it a flexible curriculum or is it a responsive curriculum? Flexible has this connotation that you can do what you like. What we're looking for is a responsive curriculum that responds to your needs. So that is what we're working on at the moment. Again, if you want to be involved with that, we'd love to have you on board. I'm going to leave my card out. Grab it and drop me an email. But any questions about what we've got coming up next? It's not an open one. It's a very focused. But there will be a report that comes out, so you'll be able to find out. Yeah. So join the conversation. And these are the channels that we tend to use. Use program communities. Use those as discussion threads. Ask questions. Not just ask questions, answer questions. Put up examples of good practice. If you've created something and you want feedback on it, ask for it. Because the PYP community are very generous in giving that sort of feedback. How many of you have joined one of the many PYP Facebook groups? Please, if you're a Facebooker, please join. Twitter? Oh, it's always the same people are putting their hands up. We've got the social media queens over here. Anyone on LinkedIn? Oh, are you, Nicole? Are you on LinkedIn? We're all okay. Use these ones, and please use sharing PYP blog. Send us your articles. Let us know what's working. We love to hear good news. If you have questions, of course, we will always answer those. But please share what's going on in your schools. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your expertise.